Hello, long time no see. We're just gonna ignore what I look like and how I sound because I have a cold. I also have OCD. Hi. So I finally have my official diagnosis of OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Yay. And with that also came my official diagnosis of ARFID, Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, which I've already made a video about because I already knew I had it. I'd already had some level of treatment for it, but obviously when my records changed, I didn't make it across. I've made a whole video about, there's another card. I've made a whole other thing about what happens when you're trans and your medical records. Not everything made it across, but these two finally have. So today I'm going to talk about OCD and how I got my diagnosis and where we are in terms of treatment and how my OCD affects me. So OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. It is a mental health condition or a mental illness. I have not figured out which term I prefer when talking about myself. And it basically, it's a disorder with obsessions and compulsions. I can only really talk about what it means to me. I have a lot of learning to do about OCD in general, but this is just how it affects me. So my OCD is mostly contamination OCD because I have a phobia of vomiting called emetophobia. And I've had this phobia since as long as I can remember, but I think what really, when I think about the first time I was like, oh no, I'm gonna be sick, it was when I was like 6, 7 years old and I had like a stomach bug and I was up all night throwing up. And that has apparently stayed with me because that told my brain that the absolute worst thing in the world that could happen was for me to be sick. Since then I have obsessed over the fact that I might be sick, and I used to have worse compulsions than I do now. I can't list any of my current compulsions because I have not got that far, but I used to do things like, oh, if I do this, then that means I won't be sick. Sometimes that was normal things, like if I wash my hands before I eat, I won't be sick because I won't have transferred germs from hands, things I've touched, hands to food. So that's kind of like a normal thing. Slightly less normal compulsions that I had were if I peel this orange all in one piece, as in all the peel comes off in one piece of peel, that means I won't be sick. That's really the one that I can remember the most, but it used to be just like the most random things, like if I walk up all of these steps without having to stop, then I won't be sick. If I colour within the lines, I won't be sick. I did sort of eventually grow out of that level of compulsion, but now I'm still very much, the ARFID is the compulsion, as in like if I don't eat this food then I won't be sick. If I only eat leftovers the day after then I won't be sick, and a lot of it is like normal food hygiene practices, which makes it quite difficult to treat. Also, like if someone I know is ill with like a sickness bug, I will stay far away, like so far. Whether that's more emetophobia or OCD, I don't really know, but the extent and the washing and the levels of like PPE and the not necessarily logical things that I would do to be like, oh, you've touched that pen, so I can't use that pen, I must stay far over here. Can't be in the same room as someone that's like had like a sickness bug. Some of it's normal, some of it's obviously not. But then constantly in my brain I'm like, oh my god, what if I didn't wash my hands properly? What if somehow they walked past my desk and they have like shed virus onto me? That type thing. It's really fun because part of during the diagnosis process and like the therapy evaluations, they were like, COVID must have really affected you bad then. I was like, not so much. just in terms of like OCD and stuff, because COVID doesn't have any of the traits that trigger my phobia or my OCD. Like, obviously I did avoid it and I took all of the health and safety precautions, as like if you followed my channel you were there for that. I had to isolate, etc, etc. But this, and they were just astounded that I have contamination OCD, but wasn't too panicked about COVID. And like, I wasn't, because it wasn't a direct trigger. Like, obviously it was bad and I avoided it because it could make me seriously ill, but I was like, oh, but it won't make me vomit, so I'm not going to panic about it. So that's kind of how it affects me. I'm just constantly anxious about it's eating mostly, but it's also about being in the room with people that are ill. If I'm having a really bad day, it'll be things like going outside into public places where anyone can have like a stomach bug and decide to go outside anyway. They can like touch banisters, they can touch like lift buttons, they can pick stuff up in the grocery store. In the grocery store, I'm not American. I've been in bed watching a lot of streamers, so they're American, the vocab has gone to my brain. But they can like pick up stuff that I would also pick up and touch. So there's kind of that's not an everyday thing. But if I'm having a bad day with the anxiety or the OCD, it just, everything is all I think about. And a lot of the time it's still all I think about, but not to the extent where it's completely ruling everything. But it is always there, whether I'm having a good day or a bad day, but the bad days are bad and the good days are just fine. So that's how my OCD affects me at the moment. This is making it look like I'm a bit naked, but also I'm really hot, so I'm going to take that off. And obviously the lighting has changed because Cambridge's weather at the moment is doing a thing where it's really sunny and then it pisses down with rain and then it's really sunny again. So we're in the rainy part, so we're just gonna have to ignore this. How did I get my diagnosis? I was actually surprised how easy it was, because for a lot of my medical conditions already, so I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I have POTS, I have visual snow syndrome, I'm deaf, I'm gonna forget some. But for all of those, like, I've had to kind of fight and argue for it. The cold urticaria was kind of a bit easier because it was, I think I'm allergic to cold. Did the ice cube test, was positive, explained that to doctor. He was like, yep, fine. And then being retested for it, it was kind of similar-ish. But we're not here for that. So I basically we have like an online portal app with my GP. So I just went on that and I was like, hey, I think I need to be assessed for OCD. And the doctor was like, why? And I was like, okay, so it's a long story. The long story involves the fact that my records only date back to like something like when I'm 18-ish. But I was treated-ish for it in the past, like informally. So when I was at school, I really, really struggled with it. And I also struggled with like depression, anxiety. So I was also getting like therapy through the school. Like, the school wasn't giving it to me, but they had like an agency that would come into schools and give like therapy, CBT, someone to talk to for people with like depression and anxiety. And then they were like, you clearly need a bit more help with this specific thing. And then they like referred me to another service like that, so it wasn't like an NHS thing. You didn't need a formal diagnosis or anything. They just took you and dealt with you. And they were like, let's offer you exposure therapy. That obviously didn't go too well because they were not well trained to give that therapy. So their idea of exposure therapy for emetophobia was stick your fingers down your throat and see how long you can bear it for. Horrible idea, don't do that. So I just sort of explained like, look, this is the situation. I have OCD, I have emetophobia, and I just obsess about it all the time. I used to have compulsions, now I don't so much, but if I think something might make me sick, I act a bit weird about it. And I'd very much like to act slightly less weird, and also it's affecting my eating really bad. I'm quite a small person anyway. I would very much just like to be able to just eat food. That would be nice. she was like, yep, I agree that that is something that should be dealt with, and then referred me to like the psychology place in the hospital. Like a week or two later, I got a letter through being like, hey, here's your appointment, and it was going to be like a video consultation, which is like a triage kind of thing, to be like, is this the right service for you? What kind of service do we need to then like put you onto? Tell me everything. So I had a really nice human that was just basically like, what's the problem? And I just regurgitated all of that, like, hey, so anxiety about eating because of emetophobia, etc, etc. She was like, yeah, you definitely, that is OCD, well done. And I was like, oh, thank you. I'm going to refer you for some CBT. And CBT is not necessarily the best option for people with OCD, especially if you're already an overthinker. It can maybe not be so great. More on that when I've like experienced more of it. So yeah, she was just like, yeah, you have OCD, I'm gonna write to your GP. Here's also like a eating disorder forum, like a place in Cambridgeshire that's like, we try and help. But it's self-referral, so you can refer yourself to them, and we will refer you through to the mental health team with Cambridgeshire hospitals. And I was like, okay, yeah, great, that's cool. Okay, sorry, excuse any framing change. I needed to clear out my camera roll. Considering I've not filmed for a while, that was a shock. So I checked my like GP portal, and they were like, yep, there's your OCD diagnosis, great, diagnosed with ARFID, like formally written down. I was like, that's progress, great. And then also diagnosed with specific phobia of vomiting, also great. It's nice to have that on paperwork, so next, if there's ever a problem, I can just go in and be like, here, instead of having to explain everything. And then I receive a letter about my CBT, and it's like another triage for CBT, so it's like an assessment for their CBT services, because there's different types of CBT and different therapists that have different strengths. And that was a telephone appointment. So they rang me up, and I was like, hi, hello there, can I speak to Max please? I was like, yep, that's me. And then we were just talking about like basic kind of medical stuff, so like, oh, do you have any other diagnoses? Do you have anything like physical? And I was like, yeah, here we go. So there's a list of like colic carrier, POTS, Ehlers-Danlos, just the whole list. And then it comes to like, oh, and I also have hearing loss. And she's like, oh, how are you speaking to me now? I was like, with my hearing aids. She's like, yeah, but like, how are you able to hear me now? I was like, because I have hearing aids. Which I'm not wearing right now because A, I'm home alone in my room, I don't need to hear me, and number two, my ears are blocked from my cold. That went back and forth for a minute, and I was like, hearing aids aid the hearing I have left. So I can hear a little bit without them, can hear quite a lot without them, being realistic, but for her to understand, like I can hear a little bit, and then they just boost what I have. So they make me able to hear more, but not perfectly. She's like, oh, right, okay, interesting. I was like, okay, can we get on to the assessment now? And then they do that like questionnaire. I have it somewhere, but I can't be bothered. If you also have a mental illness or a mental health condition, you will know the questionnaire that I mean. And it's the depression, anxiety one. Unsurprisingly, I scored quite highly on both. Some of them feel a little bit you need context for them, like how often do you fall asleep and feel well rested, and as someone with chronic fatigue, never. But obviously that makes you score quite highly in that section. You're just like, that, yeah, but there's other reasons for that. But anyway, so we do that, and they're like, oh, you're quite high on the scale, we'll see if we can bring that down. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then it was just like, right, let's talk about your OCD. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And she just didn't really seem to get it. It was really frustrating. She's like, so what about your OCD is bad? And I was like, well, it really restricts what I eat. She's like, oh, would you say that you try to eat healthy? And I was like, no. She's like, how does it affect your eating then? I was like, well, I have like anything new food, worried it might make me sick. outside food, worried it might make me sick. Takeaways that I go to all the time, worried it might make me sick. Other people's cooking, worried it might make me sick. It's she's like, well, that doesn't sound like OCD. And I was like, it is though, because it's constant every day, just obsessing over it. She's like, yeah, but it just sounds more like emetophobia. I was like, what if the two were linked? And then she was like, well, you're quite a small person, so at least you're not overeating. I'm like, that is not the first time I've heard something like that from a health professional. We should not focus on the fact that I'm a small person and say, maybe if you just don't want to eat that much, it's good because it keeps you skinny. That's perhaps not helpful to say to anyone, let alone someone that already struggles with eating. And yeah, but it was sort of just a bit of back and forth like that. And then there was a specific moment that I remember where she was asking me about like, oh, so do you have any intrusive thoughts? And I was like, yes. And she was like, what are your intrusive thoughts? And I was like, well, it's another one that pertains to eating. Because she was getting frustrated that I was just talking about eating and food. And I was like, yeah, I know, but that's how it affects me the most. But I gave another eating example of like, sometimes the intrusive thoughts in my brain will be like, what if you just ate loads of moldy food so that it will make you sick, and then, you know, it's over and done with. Which obviously fills me with great deals of anxiety and panic, and then just makes me not want to eat, just in case the brain goblins make me eat moldy food anyway, which is something that I would never do. And like, you shouldn't, because it's just normal food hygiene to not eat moldy food. And she's like, right, so you binge eat on moldy food. And I was like, no, that is not what I said. You asked me what my intrusive thoughts were, and I told you that sometimes I have intrusive thoughts about eating the moldy food. She's like, oh, okay, well that's still like eating. And I was like, well, another one is I get intrusive thoughts about having like, sort of like similar to like temper tantrums, or just like a tantrum in general, where someone says something to me and I just snap and I just like throw shit at them, or like I want to just like beat them up, which is like something I would never do because I'm too peaceful for that. I cannot be bothered. I don't like drama. I don't like confrontation. Why would I want to do that? She's like, right, so you beat people up a lot. Is that, do you struggle with anger? And I was like, no, but you just asked me what my intrusive thoughts were and then repeated them back to me as if that's something I actually do. Can you not see how that might be triggering to somebody? And I'm very lucky that I actually have quite a good handle on my mental health. I've done about as much as I can do on my own. So I know that that's not the kind of person that I am to have done that. But if someone was in crisis or didn't have such a good understanding of like themselves and their brain, how can she not see that repeating an intrusive thought back to somebody as if that is something that they would do could be triggering? And it kind of did trigger me a little bit, but in a sense that I was like just frustrated and pissed off and like, this is so infuriating. And it kind of continued on that, and I just don't even want to read the letter because I know it's not going to be super accurate. She's like, right, okay, cool. So we're going to put you on the wait list for some CBT, and you know, you'll hear from us. I'm also going to write to your GP and ask them to send you to a dietitian. Are you okay with trainees? Because they have shorter waiting lists and everything's recorded, so if something goes bad, we can review tapes and stuff. I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'm like, okay, still might be a while, but it'll be video consultation. I have yet to actually have my first session of CBT for OCD. I thought that was probably a good place to start this conversation. Currently I'm not on any medication for it because what they would normally suggest at this point would be propranolol or another beta blocker for anxiety. I'm already on that for POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. I will also put a video up there. So I'm kind of already on what they would suggest, and they don't really want to go straight to antidepressants, and neither do I. I'm keen on avoiding antidepressants. I'm already on the anxiety medication. It's literally just trying to therapize it away. I'm going to try and avoid the exposure therapy because it was not a good idea to suggest teenagers stick their fingers down their throat. It's not really a good idea. So I won't be doing any therapy that involves that, but there are some good exposure therapies out there for OCD. They're just not CBT based. I think it's called ERP, exposure response prevention. I don't know how I go about requesting that. Yeah, so that's where we are with the OCD. That has now been diagnosed. Finally. It's nice getting stuff like that actually written down. Yeah, so if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. While you're there, like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Videos come out whenever.